Hi, I'm Lindsay.
And I'm Matt. I have a question for you, Lindsay.
Okay.
Are you a dreamer or not?
Not really, but if I am gonna dream, it's 100% when I'm working on homework. That's when I plan my best vacations, it's when I know what I'm gonna eat for the rest of the week, and I'm really good at focusing on anything other than the homework in front of me.
I can definitely relate to not being able to focus at the task at hand. But today we're gonna look at some tools that can help us to focus on Jesus. So let's check it out.
Today, our story is from the book of Mark. It's a story about an upstairs room, an evening meal, and a shocking revelation.
It was the time of the Passover feast in Israel. This was when the people of Israel celebrated how God had rescued them from slavery and brought them out of Egypt hundreds of years earlier. Jesus had come to Jerusalem to celebrate the Passover. He had been traveling and teaching with his disciples for over 3 years now, and many people were excited about who they thought he was. Just a week earlier, when Jesus entered Jerusalem, people lined the road waving palm branches and cheered for him because they believed he was the king who would rescue them from the Romans. But Jesus knew this wasn't the plan. God's plan was much bigger. One night, while he was eating dinner at a friend's house, a lady wanted to give Jesus a very special gift. She brought a jar of very expensive perfume and poured it over his head. The disciples thought this was a waste, but Jesus insisted this gift was to prepare him for his own death and burial. Judas was particularly upset by this and left the dinner to betray Jesus. A couple of days later, the disciples all gathered in an upstairs room to celebrate the Passover together. But as they started the meal, none of them could have imagined how that evening would end. And that leads to today's story from Mark 14, verse 12 to 26.
Why do bananas have to put sunscreen on before they go to the beach? Because they might peel. Hi, I'm Mikayla. So when I need to focus in on something really important, I sort of sit up straight, I look right at the thing, and I go, focus, focus, focus. And most of the time it works. We all have different ways of focusing on different things and at different times. And sometimes it can be hard for us to focus, so we need to set time aside to focus on it. And that brings me to today's big idea, which is communion helps us focus on what Jesus did for us. Last time we heard the story of Jesus throwing out animal sellers and money lenders out of the temple courts. And now a few days have passed and Jesus and his disciples are arriving for the Jewish holiday of Passover. And that's where our story begins. Today's God story takes place in Mark 14, so let's set the scene. So it's Passover meal, and this is a very important celebration for Jews. The disciples had to prepare for the meal, so they asked Jesus, where do you want us to go to set up this meal? So let's see what Jesus did. So he sent out 2 of his disciples. He told them, go into the city. A man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him. He will enter a house, say to its owner, the teacher asks, where's my guest room? Where can I eat the Passover meal with my disciples? He will show you a large upstairs room. It will have furniture and will be ready. Prepare for us to eat there. When they arrived for the meal, it was exactly the way Jesus had said it would be. Let's see what happens next. While they were at the table eating, Jesus said, what I'm about to tell you is true. One of you who is eating with me will hand me over to my enemies. In other words, Jesus said that one of his disciples, one of his close friends, was going to betray him and give him away to his enemy. Let's read what happens next. The disciples became sad. One by one they said to him, surely you don't mean me. It is one of you, Jesus replied. It is the one who dips bread into the bowl with me. While they were eating, Jesus took bread. He gave thanks and broke it. He handed it to his disciples and said, take it. This is my body. Then he took a cup. He gave thanks and handed it to them. All of them drank from it. This is my blood of the covenant, he said to them. It is poured out for many. What I'm about to tell you is true. I won't drink wine with you again until the day I drink it in God's kingdom. Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. Now, just to be clear, Jesus didn't actually mean for them to eat his body or drink his blood. The bread is a symbol for Jesus' body, and the wine is a symbol for Jesus' blood. In other gospel tellings of this story, Jesus says to break bread together and drink wine together as a way to remember his sacrifice for us. You see, earlier in Jesus' life, he called himself the bread of life, meaning that we get our life from Jesus. And the wine represents the blood that would be spilled for Jesus' sacrifice. Jesus knew that it was coming, even though his disciples didn't. Today, we eat bread together and drink wine or grape juice together as a way to remember Jesus' sacrifice, and we call it communion. Then Jesus told his disciples that this would be his last meal with them together until they were up in God's kingdom. Now, that was probably really confusing because they had no clue what was coming, but then they sang a hymn together and went up to the Mount of Olives. Jesus was preparing for what he knew was coming, his death. Though he kept hinting at it, his disciples didn't know exactly what was going on, but they knew something was going to happen. But this time of communion with Jesus, before he was arrested and sent to the cross, must have been a very special time. You see, even today, 2,000 years later, we still eat bread and drink wine together, this bread representing Jesus' body, and this wine or grape juice representing the blood of Jesus. And this helps us focus on the amazing sacrifice that Jesus made for us. That's it for me. I'm Mikayla, and I'll see you around.
Turn to the person next to you and answer the following questions.
Yeah! Question time. Have you ever taken communion? What was it like? How do you think symbols can help us focus on Jesus?
Communion is a great way to focus on what Jesus did for us, and there are other tools that we can add to help be reminded of Jesus in our daily lives.
Yeah, and I don't want you to think that focusing on something is a chore. We focus on things that we enjoy too.
Absolutely. When I play rugby, I have to focus on keeping myself safe and keeping my teammates safe, and that never feels like a chore.
Yeah, I found that with sports too. We checked in with a few of our friends, Dan, Byron, and Kevin, who are hockey players, to ask them what they love about hockey. We wanted to see if there was a correlation between something that you love and your ability to focus on it.
Let's check it out.
Have you ever wondered what motivates people to play a sport where you have to get up early in the morning, suffer the extreme cold, and risk potential injury? Well, I'm here with a couple of my friends to answer the question, why do we love the sport of hockey so much that we're willing to risk all of this just to play? Come with me and let's find out.
We love the game. We really enjoy it. We go out there early in the mornings and we just really enjoy it. It's our passion. I remember my first goal like it was yesterday. It was so exciting. I was about 10 years old. The feeling that day was great. It made my day for sure.
I really enjoy hockey because I'm kind of a competitive person. I really like sports in general, but ice hockey is super fun. It's totally different from any other sport you play because it's on ice and it's high speed, high paced.
I have a good passion for it. It keeps me sharp, my brain and my body, And it's I don't mind the cold, and I don't mind just getting out there and like putting in the effort because I enjoy it.
Hockey's a sport that sort of uses a whole bunch of different skills together, right? So skating is a big one. Like you need to know how to skate, and you need to have speed, but you also need to have endurance. You need to be able to turn quickly, you need to be able to stop. These are all things you need to practice, and it takes time to learn those things.
It's hard going there when you don't want to, but I think when you're there, you just go into a totally different zone. You're there, you're in a different area, then you really enjoy it. You can put everything else behind you.
One of the great things about doing something that you really enjoy is that you can focus 100% on that, and you can kind of just tune out the other stuff that's going on, in your life. It's a great tool for just, being focused on something else for a little bit and not letting, those things weigh you down all the time. So I think Jesus, to me, is very similar to hockey because he's a great source of hope, and where hockey kind of distracts me from my problems and that I have to focus 100% on that, Jesus helps me draw my focus away from my problems by giving me hope about the future. And through prayer and through reading his word, my problems, they seem so much smaller than they were before. A lot like the way you bond and really grow in understanding with your hockey teammates, I think having a community of believers together who really grow and kind of understand the struggles different people are going through, you really kind of learn each other's strengths and weaknesses, and you can build off of that and really benefit from knowing those different things and build each other up.
Some people like watching movies, some people may like reading, some people like drawing, or just like hanging out with friends. And then I think he enjoys us to enjoy ourselves, even if that happens to be hockey.
Praying strengthens my relationship with Jesus, and just focusing on him really helps me feel connected with him.
I think communion is a way that helps me focus on Jesus. It's sort of perspective reset, because I think I live a lot of my life not really thinking about the sacrifice Jesus made all the time, But when I take communion, it's a great opportunity for me to think back on that and think about the significance of that sacrifice and just be thankful for it and, remember to continue living my life in a way that reflects that.
Question time. How do you think communion can strengthen your relationship with Jesus? Why would you encourage others to take communion?
So we just heard what Dan said. When you love something, you can focus on it.
Yeah, and I love that in Dan's relationship with Jesus, he finds that Jesus draws his attention away from his problems and gives him hope for the future.
Yeah, there are so many ways that we can remember Jesus, whether it's reading our Bibles, listening to music, or just looking around at creation. But let's remember that communion is a great way to remember Jesus because it directly connects us with the sacrifice that he made for us.
Yeah, Jesus is awesome. Let's break up now into our small groups and see what this looks like in our own lives.